On the morning of November 13th, 2019, a man named Abdul Imram Juma, or just Abdul, woke up thinking it was going to be the biggest day of his life. He was the so-called chairman of Westload Financial Solutions, a big title for a guy who, spoiler alert, wasn't actually who he said he was. That morning, Abdul was scheduled to meet with a businessman from Qatar, the kind of meeting that screams millions of dollars, fancy contracts, and the illusion of respectability. The Qatari investor was looking for a $15 million loan to build a school back home, and Abdul, he was ready to be that guy to make it happen. On the table was a contract that looked solid, stamped, and official. The businessman would sign, the money would move, and everybody would win. At least that's what Abdul wanted him to believe. His business cards had addresses, emails, even working phone numbers. Everything looked airtight. But here's the twist. Abdul wasn't a CEO. He wasn't even close. He was a con artist. This whole deal was a setup. Buried in the fine print of that contract was a little condition. Before any loan could be processed, the businessman had to pay a consultancy fee. That fee, $225,000, about 24 million Kenya shillings, and the payment was supposed to go through a legit sounding Kenyan law firm called Okach and Partners. So picture it. Abdul, dressed sharp, full of confidence, probably rehearsing his lines in the mirror that morning. He was about to walk away with 24 million, one signature, and he'd never have to think about rent, bills, or a 9 to 5 ever again. It was the perfect crime until it wasn't. Because what Abdul didn't know is that this deal, this big break he had been planning for months, was about to turn into his biggest downfall. But before we go further into this rabbit hole, I need to pause here and talk to you guys directly. If you've been following this channel for a while, you've noticed we've been quiet, too quiet, and here's why. We got hit with a lawsuit. Back on July 15th, we dropped a video about the Akasha cartel. We told the story of how the Akasha family rose and fell, and how they played the justice system like it was their personal playground in the early 2000s. We dug into public records, referenced credible news sources, and only talked about what was already documented, nothing more, nothing less. But the crazy part, the video is gone, completely wiped. Not because we wanted to, but because legal pressure forced it down. And this is where it gets real. We honestly believe this lawsuit isn't about facts or defamation. It's about silencing. It's about making sure people like us, small creators, students, people without resources, can't shine light on stories that powerful people once buried. It's frustrating, it's exhausting, and it's expensive. Legal aid is helping, but the truth is, fighting these cases costs money. Money we don't really have. That's why we are reaching out. If you believe in what we do, if you think stories like this deserve to be told, we are asking you to support us. Every little bit counts. Even the smallest contribution makes a huge difference. Because here at Nairobi Insight, we don't run from tough stories. We don't hide, we don't stay silent. We believe in telling the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it makes the people in power. So, if you are new here, subscribe. If you've been riding with us, thank you. And if you want to help us fight this legal mess, you already know we appreciate you more than words can say. Now, with that out of the way, let's get back to Abdul. The man who thought he was about to outsmart everyone but ended up playing himself. So let me give you some background to put everything into perspective. A businessman from Qatar had a dream. He wanted to build a $15 million international school in Doha. Big project, big money, big vision. To make it happen, he had a financial advisor to scout the globe for anyone willing to finance it. And that's where things started to go downhill. During the search, the advisor got connected to a guy in the Philippines. This guy claimed he had a plug, a company that could secure the funds. That company, Westload Financial Solutions Limited, operating out of Flamingo Towers in Upper Hill, Nairobi. On paper, it sounded professional, respectable, global. But behind the polished exterior was Abdurrahman Imran Juma, going by the alias Abdul. He wasn't some financial powerhouse. He was a conman who had been plotting this exact opportunity. And just like that, the Qatari businessman and Abdul's world collided. They met, they shook hands, they talked deals, and the Qatari, with no idea of the trap he was walking into, agreed to move forward. The payment terms were simple. 2 installments, one at $157,500 and another at $67,599. On top of that, Westload issued an invoice for another $6,900 in so-called legal and initial engagement fees. To keep everything look clean, the payments were to be routed through a respected Nairobi law firm, Okach and Partners. This was all part of Abdul's play. By using a legit law firm as the middleman, the deal looked ironclad. No red flags, no reason to question it. So, as agreed, before leaving Nairobi, the Qatari businessman wired a total of $164,450, about 17.7 million Kenya shillings, to Okach and Partners in 4 separate transactions. He thought he was securing a future for his project, but really, he was handing Abdul the keys to his bank account. 2 weeks later, Abdul sent over what looked like proof of success, a wire transfer confirmation. According to paperwork, the Qatari businessman's 15 million loan had been processed through Qatar National Bank. For a brief moment, the victim believed it. He thought the funds were real, that his dream project was finally on its way. But on December 4th, 2019, reality hit. He checked his account and there was nothing. No $15 million. No transfer, no loan, just silence. When he called Abdul to ask what went wrong, that's when the games began. At this point, Abdul knew he couldn't keep the ruse alive on his own. He needed backup, and that's when he called in the big guns. Ramon Abbas. You probably know him by his street name Hushpuppi. Now, if you're into calm stories like me, you've definitely heard of this guy. He wasn't just some small-time Nigerian scammer with a laptop and a fake email template. No, Hushpuppi was one of the most notorious internet fraudsters in history. He was living like a celebrity, with millions of Instagram followers watching him flaunt designer clothes, luxury cars, private jets, and penthouse views. He was untouchable. In just 18 months, this man laundered over $300 million, that's 38 billion Kenyan shillings, through online scams. That's the scale we are talking about. He was huge. But here's the irony. Abdul reaching out to him would be the exact thing that eventually destroyed him. This partnership became the final nail in Hushpuppi's coffin. Abbas came into the scheme posing as a director at Wells Fargo Bank under the alias Malik. But before he agreed, he had one simple question. How are we splitting the money? His terms were straightforward, and I quote, "What I had in mind is that if there's $150,000, I get $50,000 and you guys get $100,000. Deal set." Abdul quickly reassured that Qatari businessman that a senior bank official from the US, Mr. Malik, would be reaching out with a solution to fix the so-called problem with the missing $15 million transfer. Behind the scenes, Hushpuppi got to work. He instructed his American contacts to open fake bank accounts under company names designed to look identical to the victim's own business. That way, everything would feel legitimate. And when Abbas finally contacted the victim, he played the role perfectly. As Mr. Malik, he told the Qatari businessman that in order to clear up the mess, he will need to open a US bank account so that $15 million could be deposited safely. Since the victim was overseas, Hushpuppi offered to handle it on his behalf. After all, Malik was supposedly a senior bank director with all the right clearance. The victim, thinking he was speaking to a high-level banker, agreed. Within days, a US account was opened in his company's name to make it even more convincing. Abbas had one of his American associates, a literal, real white guy, not to sound racist, call the victim pretending to be from Wells Fargo. Later, he even bragged to Abdul. He is so happy, and I quote, "I had a white guy call him from America now. Real white guy." The victim bought it. He texted Abdul saying that Mr. Malik from the US had confirmed everything. The account was set up and the 15 million would be transferred to London once it cleared the US system. But here's the truth. Abbas' crew had registered a fake company with almost exact same name as the Qatari businessman's and used it to open a Wells Fargo account in Canoga Park, California. They had complete control over it. To tighten the grip, Hushpuppi sent over documents asking the victim to grant them power of attorney over the account. He even handed him login credential for online banking, so the whole thing felt authentic. The victim logged in. The account looked real. Everything seemed in motion. But then the con shifted gears. A few days later, Abbas claimed there was a new issue. The account couldn't release the $15 million unless it was first activated with a $250,000 deposit. That's about 27 million Kenyan shillings. That was the breaking point. The victim hesitated. He didn't want to send any more money. He demanded to speak to Abdul directly. Now, Abdul, sensing the deal was falling apart, told the victim to hold it off. But this hesitation sparked a heated fallout between him and Hushpuppi. Because remember, this wasn't just about the victim anymore. It was about the scammers themselves fighting over who got what slice of the pie. And that's when the cracks in the empire started to show. The scam was crumbling from the inside. Abdul wanted to keep the victim from sending any more money, but Abbas, he wasn't having it. He sent Abdul a blunt text, and I quote, "Bro, don't let me be wasting my time. How are you telling the client not to pay?" By December 23rd, 2019, the victim finally gave in. He agreed to send more money. And the moment Abbas heard that, he put the wheels in motion. First, he reached out to his old money mules in Nigeria, guys who had helped him move dirty cash before. The plan was simple. They'd receive the $250,000, keep a cut for themselves, and then wire the rest to Abbas. But greed ruins everything. The mules wanted half, 50%. Abbas wasn't having it. He saw that as robbery. The deal collapsed before it even began. And that's when Abbas did something insane. Instead of fighting over who would hold the money, he decided to spend it not on cars, not on property, on a watch. But not just any watch, a Richard Mille RM1103, a timepiece described by its makers as a racing machine on the wrist. This wasn't your everyday Rolex or AP Flex. Richard Mille is on a completely different level. These watches are status symbols reserved for the top 1% of the top 1%. You seal them on the wrists of Formula One drivers, global sports icons, and billionaires who don't even blink when dropping $250,000 on a piece of metal. Even American rap mojo Jay-Z had been spotted wearing the RM1103, and that was exactly the league Hushpuppi wanted to be in. He didn't just want money, he wanted to be seen as one of them. Now you know. The RM1103 goes for well over $250,000. So Abbas reached out to a luxury watch seller in Florida. The dealer sent him multiple options, complete with photos: new rose gold titanium, $230,000, full rose, $265,000, new full rose, $275,000. Abbas didn't hesitate. He picked the rose gold titanium, and just like that, he told the Qatari businessman to wire $230,000 directly to the watch seller, and the victim actually did. But here's where things took a turn. When the wire transfer went through, the victim listed the purpose of the payment as for school fees, yet the money was being sent to a watch shop in Florida. That single detail, that contradiction, raised eyebrows. It was the kind of red flag that doesn't just disappear. Somehow, the issue was brushed aside, and the transfer, it went through. The watch was packaged, but not like a normal delivery. It wasn't shipped through FedEx. It wasn't tracked with DHL. No, the Richard Mille was personally carried on a first-class flight to Dubai, hand-delivered straight to Abbas. What Abbas didn't know is that he had just signed his own death warrant, because while he was drooling over the crown jewel of his collection, the FBI was already watching, and this watch, this one flamboyant purchase, will spark the chain of events that tore his empire apart. So when the watch finally arrived in Dubai, hand-carried on a first-class flight by a handler, Hushpuppi did exactly what everyone expected him to do. He flexed. On January 13th, 2020, he posted a photo to his favorite platform, Instagram, with the RM1103 glistening on his wrist. And just to add spice, he captioned it, and I quote, "One of the best things I learned that keeps me going is to never take criticism from people I will never go to for advice." It was pure Hushpuppi, loud, defiant, untouchable. But what he didn't know was that the FBI was already watching. See, the $230,000 payment for that watch had raised suspicions. The wire transfer was flagged because the stated purpose was for school, yet the money was sent to a luxury watch dealer in Florida. That little inconsistency was all it took. The case landed on the desk of Special Agent Andrew John Innocenti, a veteran in tackling organized cybercrime. This was the guy who had chased down internet-run syndicates across the globe, and now his eyes were on Hushpuppi. The FBI codenamed the investigation Operation Fox Hunt. Meanwhile, completely unaware that the net was tightening, Hushpuppi and Abdul's gang were plotting their next move. They had already squeezed $644,000, about $64 million, from the Qatari victim. The profits were already being split. Abdul Juma made $31 million, quietly wired into Nairobi. Hushpuppi had pocketed $33 million, blowing $23 million on the Richard Mille, and another $10 million to fraudulently buy citizenship on the island of St. Kitts and Nevis by faking a marriage. But not everyone was eating. One member of the crew, Chibuzo, hadn't seen a single cent, and that was about to start a war inside the syndicate. By December 6, 2019, the team was ready to level up. Abdul Juma messaged Chibuzo. "You'll see Chibuzo, the tech guy of the crew, about the next phase of the con." And I quote, "Hush and I spoke. We will need something like a Wells Fargo offshore website where the client can log in online and attempt a transfer." The plan convinced the victim that the $15 million he had been chasing for months had finally landed in his account, then squeeze him for even more money under the guise of clearing the funds. This wasn't going to be some flimsy PDF or fake email. No, this was next level deception. Chibuzo got to work, and a few days later, he delivered something that made even Hushpuppi's jaw drop, and I quote, "I have created something that will blow the client's mind," Chibuzo announced. Not only had he built a fake Wells Fargo offshore website that looked legitimate enough to fool anyone, but he had also set up a fake telephone banking number. Now, the victim could call, speak to counter service, and confirm that the $15 million had been deposited. Mind blown. Hushpuppi immediately shared the news with Juma, and like any good scammer thinking in dollars and cents, he asked the key question: how much money should we bill the client? After a quick strategy huddle, they decided on $570,000 upfront with an additional $250,000 to be collected later. The setup was flawless. Juma sent the telephone banking information to the victim and instructed him to call the number and verify that the $15 million was sitting there waiting for him. The illusion was perfect. The money didn't exist. The victim saw exactly what they wanted him to see. And the scammers, they were about to rake in even more millions, all from a fake website and a phone line. It was audacious, it was brilliant, and it was insane. It worked. Moments later, the victim called Hushpuppi, now back in his Mr. Malik Wells Fargo persona, practically shaking with excitement, and I quote, "Oh my God, I can't believe it is true," he said. "Can you transfer the funds to Qatar?" Hushpuppi played it cool, and I quote, "Listen, you know this thing is not easy, and this is why you need to be very confidential about this whole process, because it's not easy completely." The victim begged. He was ecstatic. He wanted the $15 million wired immediately, and Hushpuppi, keeping up the illusion, agreed. As soon as the call ended, he rang Juma in Nairobi, and I quote, "Aye bro, you have no idea. My God, the clients can't even breathe, bro. The excitement, it's crazy. He's even crying tears of joy, congratulating me, thanking me. Sorry if I had wronged you," he reported. Then, almost proudly, he asked, "Are you proud of me or no?" Juma, trying to match his energy, responded, "It's a perfect job, bro." But the hustle wasn't done. Hushpuppi immediately texted Chibuzo in Lagos, and I quote, "How soon will the fake website be ready?" Chibuzo said by the end of the day. Hushpuppi wasn't patient. "Give me a storyline now," he ordered. Chibuzo sent over a screenshot for a document about US state non-resident withholding tax. Hushpuppi immediately forwarded it to the victim, claiming he will need to pay $575,000 in withholding tax before the funds could be released. The victim hesitated, and I quote, "Sorry, but this is too much," he said. Then, desperate, he asked Hushpuppi if there was a way to reduce it. The scammers crumbled. Hushpuppi forwarded screenshots to Juma and Chibuzo. After some discussions, they decided to pretend the lenders had agreed to cover part of the tax, hoping to get the victim to pay a lower amount. But there was a problem. Chibuzo hadn't received his cut from the $330,000 they had previously extorted. He was also still unpaid for creating the fake Wells Fargo website. His team in Lagos was pressuring him, and he was impatient. Very impatient. So, in a moment of reckless desperation, he did something no scammer ever wants to do. He went rogue. He told the victim the truth. Juma and Abbas, Hushpuppi, are fake. He admitted. That one confession shattered the illusion. It was a mistake that would do more than just anger the gang. Combined with the $230,000 Richard Mille watch Hushpuppi had just flexed on Instagram, it planted the seeds of distrust, greed, and paranoia that will destroy the gang from within. The con that had seemed unstoppable was now teetering on the edge of collapse. When Hushpuppi found out Chibuzo had snitched, he didn't waste time. He plotted revenge. He went straight to his connect in Nigeria, Deputy Commissioner of Police Abbas, and I quote, "Have him arrested, beat him up, make him regret it." And just like that, the country's top cop was working for an Instagram scammer. Kyari promised, and I quote, "We will pick him today or tomorrow." Hushpuppi, always impatient, pushed harder. "I'll take care of the team after they pick him up." By the end of the day, Chibuzo was behind bars. Kyari even sent Hushpuppi a photo of him in custody, and I quote, "We have arrested the guy. He is in my cell." Hushpuppi's reply was ice cold. "I want him to go through serious beating of his life." With Chibuzo out of the way, Hushpuppi and Juma kept squeezing their victim, and on January 13, 2020, the Qatari businessman finally cracked. He agreed to pay $440,000 in taxes. The money was funneled into a Nairobi law firm, Okach and Company Advocates, in 7 separate transfers. Almost $300,000 hit Kenya, but then greed split the gang. Juma refused to share. His excuse, the $330,000 Hushpuppi had blown on the Richard Mille, made them even. Hushpuppi snapped. He cut Juma off, no more communication. But he wasn't done with the victim. On Valentine's Day, February 14, the victim, now desperate and nearly bankrupt, confined in Malik, still believing Hushpuppi's fake Wells Fargo persona. And I quote, "I know you think I'm stupid, but I trusted Juma and now I'm going bankrupt." Hushpuppi's response, and I quote, "Whoa, you lost over 1 million?" And then, in the most twisted way possible, he offered to help. His version of help was another scam. He told the victim he'd speak to his supervisor, but it would cost $180,000 in confidentiality fees. By March 2nd, 2020, the victim wired $100,000 and $80,000 into 2 accounts Hushpuppi controlled. And even then, he still asked when the 15 million would arrive. But Hushpuppi wasn't done bleeding him dry. 10 days later, on March 12th, he introduced yet another fake character, Yusuf, supposedly a Wells Fargo higher-up who slid into the victim's WhatsApp with one last demand for transfer charges. This time, the victim finally broke. "I'm not going to pay more. I'm out of this game. You are doing what exactly Juma did. I'm sure you, Juma, and Malik are all one team." But it was already too late. By then, the gang had siphoned off $1,127,000, more than 120 million Kenyan shillings, and disappeared into thin air. What they didn't know was that the FBI had just been watching. They were already closing in. June 2020, Dubai. Hushpuppi was living the dream. Penthouse views, luxury cars in the garage, and millions of followers online eating up every photo of his designer lifestyle. But while he was chilling in his marble palace, a storm was already at his door. Men in tactical gear burst into his apartment. At first, he thought it was armed robbers, but no. This wasn't a stick-up. It was Dubai police, armed with intel from the FBI. They tore the place apart. What they uncovered was insane. AED 150 million in cash, that's about $40.9 million US, 13 luxury cars worth over $6.8 million, 21 computers, 47 smartphones, 15 memory sticks, and 5 hard drives stacked with over 119,000 fraud files. And most shocking of all, the addresses of nearly 2 million victims worldwide. Jaw-dropping, right? Hushpuppi's reign was over. The Gucci master, who once flexed for the gram, was now a prisoner of his own greed. He pled guilty, and the US court handed him 11 years in federal prison. But Hushpuppi wasn't the only one whose empire fell apart. Back in Kenya, Abdurrahman Imran Juma, the so-called chairman of Westload Financial, was finally cornered. Authorities discovered his presence in Nairobi, and in December 2022, he was arrested in connection to the same massive fraud and money laundering scheme. The US indicted him on 61 counts: money laundering, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, aggravated identity theft. If convicted, Juma could face up to 20 years in US federal prison. But unlike Hushpuppi, Juma is still playing the system. His extradition to the US was stalled in 2025 after Kenya's Court of Appeal ruled that all legal procedure and appeals must be exhausted first. And so, while his American co-conspirator rots behind bars, Juma still walks free at home. And it's not just him. The Kenyan law firm Okach and Partners Advocate, which laundered millions through consultancy fees, is still untouched. Even Nigeria's Deputy Commissioner of Police, Abbas, the man Hushpuppi allegedly paid to kidnap and beat Chibuzo, was indicted in the US but denied everything, posting on Facebook that he was only helping Hushpuppi with a supposed death threat case. But here's the bigger picture. Kenya, Nigeria, and other countries are full of similar stories. Fraudsters who leave large of stolen money while the victims are oceans away. Cases only make headlines when foreign governments step in. So, while Hushpuppi cools his heel in a US prison, Abdul still lives free in Kenya. And it makes you wonder how many more Abduls are out there, hiding behind fake companies, dirty lawyers, and weak systems, waiting for their turn to get exposed. And that's how the empire of Abdul and Hushpuppi fell apart. From Instagram flexes to FBI raids, from fake law firms to luxury watches, it only proves one thing: crime might pay for a while, but the downfall is always louder. Speaking of which, our next deep dive might just take us back home to the Folk Bombo crew, a gang so slick with tech they made Nairobi's ATMs their personal gold mines. If you thought this story was crazy, wait until you hear how Folk Bombo almost became untouchable. Nairobi Insight.